Okay, and real quick, since I'm shooting this video, I'll go ahead and get into why I had the amp modded in the first place. When I first did my first review of the amp, I was playing the amp at stage volumes. Didn't notice any problem with fizziness or anything of that nature. And then I began a recording project. And as I started the recording project and had to bring the levels down because I actually, I record here in my house. So as I started bringing the volumes down for recording, I could hear a little bit of fizziness, staticky type fizziness coming from what I assumed at the time was the amp. Or which may have been, it actually could have been a combination of both things. I noticed that when I cranked the amp wide open, I didn't hear it. When I bring it the volume level down, I did hear it. So when I took it to this guy I know, Dale at DJL, we kind of went over and I played it and let him hear what I thought I was hearing, and we deduced that quite possibly what I was hearing was the fact that the amp needed to be cranked a little bit more to blossom. But I wanted to be able to crank that more at a more manageable level. So what we did at that point is when we added the 6V6 tubes to it and dropped the overall output wattage of the amp down. That's when. Then after we did that, I played it through my cabinet and I still heard a little bit of it. So that's when I changed V1 and V2 from the high gain JJ ECCA3S's. I changed them to a TAD 12AW7. No, it's a TAD. It's a 12AX7W something. It's basically it's the TAD Mullard reissue. It's not as high a gain output tube as the JJ, although I do think it's a better quality sounding tube than the JJ, and they cost a little bit more than the JJ tubes, but it cost me more than the JJ, but less than the groove tube, so I mean, I can't complain there. That rounded out the tone, but didn't get rid of the fizz. I like what it did with the tone, but still heard a little bit of the fizziness. Went back out there, plugged into his speaker cabinet, noticed that I wasn't hearing what I was wanting to fix. I wasn't hearing it through his cabinet. So then that's what led me to go, you know what, if I'm not hearing it through his cabinet, but I'm bringing it home and I'm hearing it through mine, then some of it was the fact of not getting the amp all the way open, but that wasn't all of it. The voice coils on those Carvin GT12 speakers, which it may not be for everybody's, but for the set of speakers that came in my cabinet, the voice coil in those speakers were giving off a staticky type sound at lower volumes where the cone and the coil are moving less. You know what I mean? Where the movement is not as drastic. At low volumes, it's almost giving like a staticky type sound that's coming from the speaker. You take that same speaker and you crank the amp, you don't hear it. Only at the very low volume settings. So once I deduced that, I just switched speaker cabinets to a different speaker cabinet. I also realized at that point that I really like the sound of Celestion GT75, excuse me. I really like the sound of Celestion GT75s, although a lot of people don't like it. It's the stock speaker of a 1968 Marshall cab, and it has a lot of bass and a little bit of compression inside the speaker that just sounds really good. So I tried to find a speaker cabinet that I could trade my speaker cabinet for that had a similar type sound, and that's how I come up with this, which is it's actually a Fender HM speaker cabinet, and it comes with an OEM eminence speaker. Now, by best I can tell by hearing, and I've not done the research to look it up yet, the best I can tell, these eminence speakers seem to be a OEM copy of a GT75 or something relatively similar to it, because it sounds very similar to the cabinet that I was using at DJL. The cabinet DJL sounds better, and I think if I were to pull these speakers out and put actual GT75s in it, this would probably sound exactly like I wanted to. But right now I'm not complaining because I think the cabinet sounds good. It's got me through my recording process. I don't have the static noise at all. I mean, you have to admit that if you compare this video right now to the other V3 video I did before I did these changes to the amp and the speaker, to me, the tone is night and day. The tone before sounded good, but was a lot more aggressive sounding. This one is not quite as aggressive sounding, but that's really not what that's not what I was going for. But I think that changing the speaker cabinet will give most of you guys exactly what you're looking for. I think most of the people that are not liking this amp are playing this amp through the matching Carvin cabinet with those GT12 speakers. And I think those GT12 speakers are good if it's cranked, but if you're at home playing it at low volumes, you're going to hear that fizz that people complain about that really isn't there. I mean, it's there, but it's not coming from here, it's coming from there. If you still feel like you're not turning, if you still feel like you're still hearing it at low volumes, I would definitely suggest the 6v6 mod. 100 watts is killer. I mean, you know, but to be honest with you, at most gigs you play, in my personal opinion, anything over 30 to 50 watts is pretty much overkill for any club musician, and pretty much any stage musician where you're actually using a PA to push the sound. And Yngwie Malmsteen used to live and die by 50-watt Marshall heads, so I mean, a 100-watt head is not, you know, it's not necessary to play a show. And anytime you think it is, you look on your volume knob at your next practice and see how loud you really got the amp going. I took this amp to a practice before I modded it at 100 watts. I had the volume on 3. I tried to turn it up to about 4 or 5, tried to get it up to about halfway, but at halfway it was way too loud for everybody else in the room. It was way too loud, overpowering the drums. So, you know, my thing is, if you don't get the amp up to at least about 50 to 60% of your volume, then you're not really cooking the power tubes and you're not getting the best out of the sound of the amp. So if you're running a 100-watt head on 3 or 4, it's overkill. I'd rather have a 30-watt amp, a 30-watt head that I was running the volume, you know, in upwards of 7, because at that point I'm really getting the complete sound of the amp. So anyway, if you get this amp and you like the way this particular setup that I've got going now sounds, just think that TAD 6v6s in the power section, dropping the wattage to about 50 to 60 watts. It's not about 50 or 60. I'll also say that when he took this amp out, he said that the amp was way loud, was much louder than the 100-watt rating it was. It was actually rating out at about 120 plus. So once he dropped the wattage on it, it's actually running 60 watts. If you have it in full power or 100-watt mode in the back, it's operating at 60. If you have it in half power at 50 watts, it's operating at around about 30 to 35 watts. Also, like I said, if you like the sound, think about the 6v6 power drop. And I'm also running the TAD, not sure which ones they are, they're the Mullard reissue tubes in V1 and V2, which I think goes a long way in helping smooth everything out. And also I'm using like a celestion GT75 knockoff. There are a lot of companies out there making a GT75-watt knockoff WGS speakers and eminence speakers, which I highly support. They're both from Kentucky, which is where I'm originally from, so I believe you can't go wrong with either one of those. I think both those companies make a GT75 copy. If not a GT75, I think you can find a lot of any speaker that you could come up with that is kind of soft on the highs. I think will complement this amp. This was for Dave and CSA, who was wondering if it could do Hendrix style distortion. It was also for the other guy, and I'm probably going to call out the wrong one. It was either 3rd Gen or another guy, I can't remember exactly. but the other guy was wondering how it would do in an extreme metal project situation. And I think the other great thing this video showcases is that the amp can pretty much live in both worlds, you know, relatively well. Anyway, get a nice choice, been gear and review. Thank you for checking it out.